I think it's an interesting exercise because one of the things we never get to see with local candidates very often is television, because television is a very different medium. Being on camera is a very different medium to what we're used to with local politicians. They get a lot of exposure via local radio, but in the modern world where internet and people have access to social media so often, people want to see a personality develop across a screen. And I think this project allows us to get a feeling for candidates, how they answer questions, because how a person is sitting and how they hold themselves when they're asked a question, that gives you more information sometimes as to how confident they feel in what they're saying than the words themselves. So I think it's an interesting exercise, and it's been interesting to see how candidates react and to get an opportunity for them to express their views clearly without continual interruption, as so often happens when they're on panel shows, that one-to-one let people hear this is what they're about. I think one of the difficulties for all council candidates is a feeling sometimes that they lack power. And because they lack power in various things that they would like to be changing, they're not too sure sometimes what it is they're going to do. So I thought today the areas where they do have control were the ones you could see them starting to chomp at the bit for. For instance, they're very concerned about rates, and they want more control of rates because they do set the rates, but they're not happy with the system that they're forced to use. And there was almost unanimity across everybody we talked to that they want to change the system to allow them collect rates in a different manner. And I think that's part of what's changing in councils at the moment. They want control over budgets, they want control over finances, and councillors are feeling the heat from the public in the street that there's no accountability to the finances. People are going to be paying property tax, they're now being taxed, and there'll be water charges, all these kind of extra charges. People are starting to ask, where's the money being spent? And you can see the councillors are feeling the heat, and they're talking a lot this election about accountability, about finances, about how to raise money, how to ease burdens on people, and that's going to be a very interesting dynamic as the election progresses. I think the problem with council is that people are still involved in party politics, and I mean that right across all parties and independents. And people like, when they get to an election, they like knocking lumps out of each other, and they like saying things about each other and saying things are going badly and things to be done differently. But the reality is they're talking about national issues at national government. When you get into council, if they actually work together, they could achieve a lot more. But very often they're so busy fighting their party line that this party can't work with that party, or this party can't be seen to let that party have any credit, or if you're an independent, all parties are the worst parties in the world. And because of that, I think councillors sometimes overstretch what they want to promise to people, and when they make these great statements about how they're going to influence policy, how they're going to change the world when they're in there, but the public is very much aware that, look, you're going in and you have a very limited role in what you can do, and most of what you're talking about is actually national politics. I think there's a good selection of candidates out there, and I think candidate selection is always one of these things. It's representative of a community and of people, and if people want to run, it's open to them to run, and you can't really complain that you don't have enough candidates or you don't have a choice. If you don't, then you run yourself. That's the rule with politics. You get what the community gives you. I think there's an interesting bunch of people there who have, across the interviews today, one thing that came across: people want jobs, they want investment, they want all those good things to come together. The question is, can they work together? Will it end up being each person saying, well, my view is how I'm going to achieve this personally, or are they willing to share some of the glory and really knuckle down? And that's the really difficult thing in every council, is to get the dynamic where a council works together or starts to be divisive. And in the first few months after an election, depending on who's elected and the mood at that time, we'll get an early lesson as to whether this will be a council where people will work together, seek to advance the cause of Longford, or whether they'll get very quickly stuck into being partisan, in disliking each other, trying to a lot of one-upmanship, point scoring within parties against each other and individuals against each other. If that starts to happen, then unfortunately you don't get progress, because one councillor on their own is never powerful enough. I think the most important thing for councillors is to have that point at which somebody knocks heads together and somebody said, look, we have to get in here, take action, close doors and come up with a decision. And one of the things right throughout various levels of government in Ireland that's very often missing is decisiveness. It's the continual wish to put a decision off, or to say, well, I don't want to take the responsibility for that. And if I were to say anything to councillors running anything, if you want to have a good political career that you can stand over, it's never be afraid to take a risk, to take a decision, and if it goes wrong, you take responsibility for that. But far too often what people try to do is prolong their own political career as a councillor. But it's better to have 5 years where you do what you believe than have 20 years of compromising, waiting and pushing out decisions. If you get a politician, you can get councillors in there who are willing to take decisions, to take very tough stances, to be very decisive about what it is they want, how they're going to do it, and really stand up for themselves each day, then you will get progress. If on the other hand they push out decisions and say, well, let's not be hasty, let's take it easy, let's look at it, you get the same as what we've always had, which is a long way of people watching each decision delayed, put back, and no real activity on the ground. One of the problems people will say to you in politics, with social media, with videos, with everything else, is they say, well, the most important thing is canvassing. Now, I'm old school when it comes to politics. Canvassing is your most important. You must wear out your shoe leather in order to get elected. Meeting people face to face is the most important thing. But that doesn't mean that you can ignore social media, you can ignore the internet, you can ignore video pieces, because politics is also changing. And this is a way of augmenting what you're saying on doorsteps, because no matter how hard you try, there's a lot of doors you won't reach. There's a lot of people you don't get to, or there's a lot of things people don't get to ask you. If you are engaging, particularly through the medium of video and internet, it allows people to see you, to feel they're getting to know you and getting to know your personality. And once you do that, you have a much greater reach than simply depending on yourself. And I think anybody that decides you can get elected without it, but you're taking a risk. If you want to do it and do it properly, and if you're really interested in communicating with people, again, it comes back to the idea of take a risk. You go out, you face the questions, don't hang back, and don't be hiding in the hope that you'll avoid a problem.